and I am very excited to introduce our next keynote speaker. Dr. Agnes Kalibata is President for Green Revolution for Africa, otherwise known as AGRA, of course. Dr. Kalibata has previously served as Rwanda's Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources, and in 2012 she received the YARA Prize for her leadership in the transformation of food security and agricultural development in Rwanda. So please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Kalibata to the stage.
Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed your tea and your coffee as well, and I hope some of it was Rwandan coffee. No, I'm joking. It's a really pleasure to be here today to give a closing remark on this conference or summit that was organized for youth and youth in agriculture. I really wanted to take the opportunity to thank MasterCard for bringing this together, these two themes together. It's amazing how the two most important issues on this continent, I would say, calling youth an issue, the two most important things in this on this continent get to be addressed differently. Youth in Africa are almost nearly every time captured in some funny ministry, and agriculture is captured in some other ministry. Thank you. Excuse me. To give you an example, in Nigeria, there's a youth under the Ministry of Youth and Social Affairs. In Rwanda, the youth were once in youth, sports, and culture. Now they're in youth and technology. In many other countries, it's youth and sports mostly. I've never heard anybody say youth and agriculture. So, and I'm not sure that's going to happen in the next decade. But at least MasterCard has made that happen. You know, got us in one room to discuss the two most important issues on this continent, our growing youth population. Africa is the youngest continent today. We have over 200 million people that are young. We have 10 million people entering the labor market every year, and only 15% of those are employed in the formal sector. So we had the numbers. This is not something we've not been hearing. This population, which is right now 19% of the global youth, is going to be 42% of the global youth by 2030. So where are they going to be employed, if not in agriculture? So when I become president, we'll have a Ministry of Youth and Agriculture. So I have a presentation just to take you through some of the things we had, and this is what I was just talking about. Some of the things we had in this conference, just to help recap, and then eventually really tell you what my final word would be on this conference that we had today. So I just talked about that, so I won't dwell on it. So then I just wanted to highlight again the agriculture, the two things that I see as a paradox in the agricultural sector, the fact that 65% of our youth, of our population is youth, and 65% of our farmers in agriculture, and somehow we really don't talk about the two of them together. Just to give you an example of how continents that have unlocked agriculture before us what they've done. And we heard about it today. In fact, we heard about it in the presentation just prior to this. In Asia, a number of countries actually did reform their land policies to make them more smallholder. You know, in Africa, we say, oh, our agriculture can't move because we are smallholder. They actually reformed their lands to make them more smallholder because it was a way of putting means in farmers' hands. Land was the means they were trying to put in farmers' hands. And then by investing in the land, started growing the population from the bottom up. And of course, eventually people leave, as we heard from the previous speaker. They leave, and they go to other sectors. But at that moment, agriculture would have done its bit of creating opportunities for people to live, because manufacturing starts and things like that start happening. We've seen a very good example where youth and agriculture grown together. When you look at what's happening in Vietnam today, also in Asia again, giving skills to youth and growing agricultural sector together is really transforming that country in manners that, in ways that we can learn from. So I thought I should mention that. So we talk about Africa's potential, and these are the three things we hear every time you go in a meeting that has anything to do with agriculture. And these are the things that I really want us to keep in mind when we think about how youth can actually be part of what the agricultural sector is doing. We still have a lot of land that can be utilized for agriculture. We have a growing food industry because African middle class is growing and is projected to be around $1 trillion in the next 5 years. Just food, feeding the middle class and all of us, you know. But the paradox is, again, 80% of what we eat as processed food is imported. And most of it actually, not from one country to another, from off the continent. So when you think about what we are exporting in terms of missed opportunities for jobs in manufacturing and other areas, then you really can't be surprised that agriculture in Africa is not transforming into more job opportunities. But we had a number of things in the last 2 days, right? A number of things. At least I got to know one thing, that African youth do not rate agriculture. They are already being in agriculture, with or without our help. They're trying their best to be in agriculture. But they are not interested in the needs that we keep talking about. I've heard people say, and yesterday someone talked about it too, oh, African farmers are aging, and we need people to farm because we are going to be feeding 9 billion people in 2030. It doesn't matter to youth, and should not, because once in a while, I don't know what has happened. Oh, okay. What has happened there? Anyway, I wanted to say that once upon a time I was young, and nothing about African farmers are aging would have convinced me to go to agriculture. So, so I don't think that is going to be the issue. So what is happening with my presentation? Can you see what I'm doing there? Anyway, the other thing is Africa needs, so one of the other things we agreed about was that Africa needs to transform if it's really going to attract Africa's youth. And we talked about innovation and technology. And we talked about the need for investment and the need for policies that encourage youth to be in agriculture, but also the need for policies that reform institutions and land issues that pertain to what youth need to be in agriculture. So there's a whole lot of work to do, and we had all that, and I won't try to go through each of them. So, okay, so I don't know what's going on here, but anyway. So we have a responsibility as institutions. There are a number of institutions here. All of you have presented. All of us had a chance to say what we do. But I just wanted to highlight that in the form of technologies, we need to make sure that the technologies that become available, because there are many, that the technologies that become available from the CG systems are reaching our farmers. And this is already happening in a number of ways. Agro has been working on making sure that technologies become localized and get to farmers. But we also need systems, like seed systems, to get them to farmers. And these are all opportunities for youth. And agro dealerships has been one of the easiest ways to employ youth. And we are taking that forward. But we need financing and financial access. And we saw that. And with a little bit, just a little bit of financing, youth can fill major gaps in the sector. But we also need advocacy. We know what doesn't work. We know what works, and what doesn't work we need to go out there. Nobody is going to do it outside you and me. We have a responsibility to make sure that what we know doesn't work starts working by talking about it and addressing it in the right forum. We talked also about the role of governments, and here I highlight a few things that came out of the role of governments, besides infrastructure and really key things to do with key institutional reforms that would have to happen around agriculture and agricultural research and extension. There's also the part of catalyzing private sector, which we know. I keep telling people that actually agriculture is a private sector business. It's not a government business. And when a country that manages to get it to that level actually does move. So we would have agriculture employing many, many more people because it has more drive coming from the private sector. One time I came to South Africa to try to get some bilateral going on agriculture, and many times from government, most of these people in government had nothing to tell me because they were not in charge of the agricultural sector. It's the private sector that was in charge. So we really then had to go out and start finding private businesses. And when we get agriculture to that level, then you know that you're doing a very good job. So we need private sector, but we need governments to work on catalyzing private sector to be in agriculture. So youth can actually be Africa's missing middle. We've been talking about a missing middle in agriculture because we talk big things in agriculture, but we forget that small things like agro dealerships, like storage facilities and getting storage going, like transport, not big time, moving things from one place to another, aggregating. We had some of those discussions here yesterday. That's why I'm giving summaries of those. But critically, we need agro-processing. We need to produce enough volumes that make us give us the opportunity to go into agro-processing so that we create jobs. Jobs, even as we talk about land, jobs in agriculture is not about tilling the land. I don't expect, much as I was told by my parents not to go into agriculture, to go to study so I don't go into agriculture. Even as I go into the future and I want my children to do agriculture, I don't want them to go to till the land. I will not tell them to go and till the land, and nobody will do that. But someone has to. It's just, we would like to be the 4%, as you see it in the US. Only 4% or 5% are working on the land to produce the rest of to feed the rest of the world, including us. But it's the technologies, again, that we need to be working on. Youth have an opportunity to be in extension and provide other services, and I did capture some of this for you, so that you just get a sense of what I'm talking about. These job opportunities in agriculture for youth, services. Here I just wanted to say that it's amazing that 2,000 years later, we managed to conserve the hoe as a tool, a functional tool in agriculture. So I just wanted to show you how we are not being creative. Even as I said that technologies are here, we are not being creative enough around this one. So we should get a prize for conserving one of the oldest tools, honestly, But the real truth is it undermines agriculture's potential because, one, how much can you do in one day? Number two, even as they till the land, the potential, actually that thing causes more erosion than production because it keeps digging the same surface over and over. It has does not penetrate enough to be able to provide the right depth that a plant is looking for. So we need to be doing something about this. Then there's these technologies that are very interesting. When I was young, I used to do this, the threshing of. Actually, I got my allergy. I remember very well that I got an allergy from threshing sorghum. Because I went for holidays and my parents were like, no, you need to do this sorghum. And I did it, and the thing coming to my nose gave me an allergy, and I'll never forgive my mom for that. But listen, so that was then. Technologies are in place now. Why aren't we moving? But these are the opportunities that I'm talking about that we could finance and get youth to be more relevant to agriculture and to find opportunities in agriculture than they were before. We still have a number of those things too, and yet we know that we have moved very far from that, but this is very common in Africa, very, very common. We say this is 40 billion. We are a 40 billion market we import 40 billions worth of food every year, but we are not developing our food market. So how will we create jobs? We are exporting 40 billion. Honestly, 40 billion can service the 10 million people that we say enter the food market, the labor market every year. So in the final analysis, I just think that we need a key shift, and that shift is around mindset, because we have nearly everything we need. We have youth that really 10 million people every year, we should be celebrating that, right? At least let's celebrate that now, because that's the best thing we can do. So we have a good number of people we can depend on. We've come to know now that with a sector that is employing 70% of our population, if we unlocked that, and people said it here before, if we unlocked that, it's going to be agriculture, not oil, not gold or diamond, that is going to drive the economies of our countries. It's the 70% of our population that are locked out of our economies that will actually drive our economies when we unlock them. So we know that now, and we need to work on it. It's the food markets that have an opportunity to provide quick wins in terms of employment that we are not exploiting. It's the land reforms that we need to do. We know what needs to be done. We know how this has worked for other continents. But you know, in Africa, land is still a power tool, you know. A husband, this is my land, I would chase you and find another wife, right? Isn't that? So it's a power tool. In the government, it's a power tool. In our homesteads, it's a power tool. We cannot continue working like this. And for me, I also see that the technologies we need are here. Because you know what? People in other continents closed the yield gap about 50 years ago. So we can't say we don't know what needs to be done. We know what needs to be done, and we really need to work on access so that our farmers can also start closing the yield gap. So 3 weeks ago, we had the AGRF, which brings all people in agriculture together, and that's when we were also talking about youth in agriculture, as we talked about today morning. And Strive is the chairman of the Agro Board, also happens to be, people call him one of the richest men on this continent, and he got rich from telecommunication. And he said something that I found interesting. He said that 15 years ago, or probably 20 years ago, if someone had said that telecommunication or mobile technology that is based around rural households was going to be a $1 billion industry, nobody would have believed that statement. So he said, when you look at what's happening in Africa today, if you took the youth population of the African continent and you took the market that is emerging and the potential of this continent, except nobody its potential, as Norman Borlaug says and Akin keeps repeating, if you took those, he said, definitely, by doing the right thing, agriculture should be the next economic driver for this continent in the next decade. And that's the key message I want us to take home. We want its potential, but we are sitting on potential that could transform this continent in the next 15 years and have Africa not only feed itself, employ its youth, but be part of feeding the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kalibata. Before I introduce our next part of the agenda, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that we found a phone this morning, a smartphone, in the Agra session next door. So if you have lost your phone, we have it back with the AV team here, and you'll just have to tell us what it looks like, and we'll give it back to you. And so now, I mentioned a couple of times yesterday that we were shooting a lot of video, we were putting a lot of you on the spot, and asking you for your thoughts on agriculture. And we were asking you to complete a sentence about agriculture in Africa. And so my team has put this together now as a compilation, and we would love to show you the video.
Agriculture in Africa is the next big thing after the internet.
Agriculture in Africa is offering the youth of today lucrative career options. It's no longer hard labor.
Agriculture in Africa is our job creation engine.
Agriculture in Africa is the backbone of Africa.
Agriculture in Africa is the solution to youth unemployment.
Agriculture in Africa is the future.
Agriculture in Africa is shifting from challenge and difficulty to opportunity and prosperity.
Agriculture in Africa is getting sexier and sexier for the young people that participate in it.
Agriculture in Africa means food security.
Agriculture in Africa is as profitable or as unprofitable as governments and the private sector are going to make it.
Agriculture in Africa is the most important growing industry. It's the one that will drive everything else in terms of the development.
Agriculture is the only sector that can positively engage the youth to bring out their productivity and their efficiency in Africa.
Agriculture in Africa is exciting.
Agriculture in Africa is youth-led and technology-driven.
Agriculture in Africa is the backbone for economic development and food security.
Agriculture in Africa is life.
Agriculture in Africa is a gold mine that can provide quite sustainable livelihoods, not just in feeding the millions of Africa's youth, but also in creating the potential for wealth and transformation of the continent.
Agriculture in Africa is the key to economic transformation.
Agriculture in Africa, it's an important part of young people's mixed livelihoods, and we still need to understand more about what all that means.
For youth to be able to contribute to the economic development of the continents, they have to embrace agriculture.
Agriculture in Africa is a source of tremendous untapped potential for young people, for food production, and for the entire value chain of processing and marketing and products that can provide fantastic opportunities for young people.
Agriculture in Africa is critical to our survival as a continent, and it is something that we should all be committed to.
Agriculture in Africa is transformation of the continent.
Agriculture in Africa is full of potential, but it has an image problem.
Agriculture in Africa is the next big thing for young people to invest in.
Agriculture in Africa is fodder for growth, a great opportunity for us to collaborate on designing some really exciting innovations as to how to feed the continent and the world.
Agriculture in Africa is the best potential opportunity for many, many young people. And what's really important is that it moved from the status of a potential opportunity to becoming a real opportunity.
Agriculture in Africa is about to take off, and it's just a matter of time before Africa is the breadbasket of the world.
Agriculture in Africa is probably the biggest opportunity that this continent has. We have 60% of the global arable land, yet we produce less in sub-Saharan Africa than the whole of Thailand. In that lies great opportunities for us to not only feed the world and feed Africa, but also to create huge economic opportunities for young people and for Africans in general.
Agriculture in Africa is life.
Give yourself a hand for that.